People always ask when I realized my sister wasn't just competitive, but a thief of the most personal kind. It wasn't when she flirted with my high school boyfriend, or when she cried on the shoulder of the man I planned to marry. It was the night I unlocked Cole's apartment and found her in his bed, smirking like she'd finally taken the last thing I had. Most people crumble in moments like that. I didn't. Something steadier moved through me, something I didn't recognize yet. Because that night, without knowing it, I'd already met the man who would end her life as she knew it. Growing up, people used to say my sister Diana and I were a study in contrasts. She was the kind of girl who didn't just walk into a room, she rearranged it. Bright smile, sharp jawline hair that fell perfectly without trying. I was quieter, softer around the edges, more likely to tidy the table after dinner than command the conversation. Mom said we balanced each other, but balance isn't the word I would use. The first time I noticed something was off, we were in high school. I was dating Tyler, a sweet, slightly awkward boy who carried my books and blushed whenever I touched his hand. One afternoon, he came over so we could study for a biology test. We were halfway through flashcards when Diana drifted into the living room wearing her cheer hoodie, pretending she couldn't solve a simple equation. Tyler leaned in to help, and I watched something flicker across her face, an interest that had nothing to do with math. A week later, he stopped texting as often. A month later, they were just hanging out, which everyone at school knew was code for something else. Mom said I was being dramatic. Diana can't help being charming. She laughed like it was a compliment. By the time I started dating Caleb after graduation, I'd convinced myself the first situation was bad luck. But history repeated itself. At a family dinner, Caleb tried to tell a story about his new job, and Diana placed her hand on his arm like she'd known him for years. Mom noticed, of course, but instead of calling Diana out, she whispered to me in the kitchen, "Maybe stop bringing your boyfriends here. You know how easily she gets attached." The logic was so backward, it made my teeth ache, but I stayed quiet. Staying quiet was something I'd mastered. When Mason came along, a coworker who made me laugh during overnight shifts, I told no one except Mom. She promised she wouldn't mention him. A week later, Diana bumped into him at a coffee shop in our town and suddenly needed career advice. You don't want to guess how that ended. But Evan hurt the most. We were together 2 years. We talked about rings, apartments, future kids. He met my grandparents, memorized my coffee order, left a spare hoodie at my place. We were real. And even then, Diana found her angle emotional emergency at midnight, crying on his shoulder. Mom telling me, "Evan's too kind. He can't ignore a girl in distress." When the relationship fell apart, no one looked surprised but me. I told myself I'd grow numb to betrayal. That heartbreak had a limit, but numbness is a myth. Hurt accumulates, reshaping you piece by piece. Then came Cole, a man I didn't even introduce to my family for 8 months because for once I wanted something untouched, unshared, unthreatened. He felt different, steady, real. I thought I'd finally outgrown the curse. I didn't understand then that secrets don't protect you. They just delay the inevitable. I should have known peace doesn't last in my family. It took just one slip, one careless moment for everything to unravel. I was at a cousin's barbecue when May, who has never been able to whisper at an appropriate volume, leaned over the grill and said, "So, how's that guy you're seeing? The one in Denver, the tall one." She said it casually, flipping a burger, not realizing she just handed Diana the coordinates to invade the last safe corner of my life. I felt my stomach drop. Diana's head snapped up from across the table, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Guy in Denver?" she asked. Voice sugar-sweet but sharp underneath. I forced a laugh, changed the subject, but the damage was done. Diana has never needed details. Just a hint of something I valued was enough to ignite her hunt. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying May's words, each one landing like a needle. Cole didn't post much online, but he existed. He had a job, a face, a name, and Diana was frighteningly skilled at finding what she wanted. If she could track down Mason with nothing but a coffee cup logo, she could find Cole with much less. For a few days, nothing happened. Cole and I went on dates in neighboring towns, grabbed cheap tacos after his shifts, watched late-night documentaries on his couch, but there was a tightness in my chest I couldn't shake. A constant scanning of shadows for signs of her. Then the small things started. Cole hesitated before answering my calls. He ended dates early, saying he was tired. His texts grew shorter. I told myself he was stressed with work, but deep down I recognized the pattern, the quiet drift, the emotional detour. One afternoon, I walked into a grocery store and froze. Diana stood in the produce aisle, wearing an outfit she never wore in our town. Too polished, too intentional. She wasn't holding a basket. She wasn't shopping. She was waiting. And when her phone lit up, she smiled at the screen in a way that made my skin go cold. I didn't confront her. I just walked out with my heart pounding and my throat dry. I told myself I was being paranoid. But the truth is, you can't mistake the scent of smoke when you've lived through enough fires. 2 nights later, Cole canceled our dinner, saying he needed some alone time. His voice was distant clipped. Something inside me tightened, but I didn't push. I just said good night and sat in silence long after the call ended. The next morning before sunrise, I drove to his apartment with a bag of breakfast pastries and a hope I didn't fully believe in. His car was outside. The lights in his living room were on. The hallway smelled like detergent and burnt toast. I unlocked the door quietly like I'd done dozens of times. And there she was, Diana in his bed, Cole beside her. Her hair spilled across his pillow like she owned the place. Her expression wasn't guilty, wasn't startled. It was triumphant, like this was the victory she'd been building toward her entire life. "I guess secrets aren't your thing," she said, voice lazy satisfied. Cole didn't even look ashamed. Something fractured inside me, clean and final. That was the night my breaking point became my beginning. In the days after I found Diana in Cole's bed, the world around me felt muffled, like someone had stuffed cotton into my ears. I moved through my shifts mechanically, answering patients, charting vitals, pretending I wasn't replaying that bedroom scene on loop. People think heartbreak is loud screaming, crying, throwing things. Mine was quiet, a slow freeze spreading under my skin. Smiles. I'd grown used to being underestimated, but tonight it hit different. Maybe because they weren't just dismissing me, they were erasing me. Behind me, laughter burst from the ballroom. Caroline's laugh high and glittering the sound of someone thrilled with her own performance. I closed my eyes and exhaled. Staying silent had always been my shield, but tonight it felt like a weight I could barely carry. Footsteps approached, soft measured. Professional Allison. I opened my eyes. Jason stood there, tablet in hand, expression tight, not with judgment but concern. "We need to talk," he said quietly. My pulse shifted. Not fast, shallow, controlled. "Not here," I whispered. He nodded and motioned toward a side hallway away from the guests. When the door closed behind us, he lowered his voice. "I'm sorry to bother you during your family's event, but there's an issue developing." I almost laughed. If only he knew the half of it. "What kind of issue?" "Howard Sterling." His jaw tensed on the name. "He's been arguing with staff, questioning charges, claiming we're upcharging uneducated guests." He hesitated, then added, "Maria is in tears. Jonah, too." A familiar protective anger stirred in me. The kind you don't learn from books. The kind you inherit from women who clean rooms with pride and leave the world better than they found it. "What exactly is he disputing?" I asked. "Everything he personally requested," Jason said. "Late-night catering, upgraded bar service, the premium linens. He signed the approvals, but he's threatening complaints, bad reviews, demands a meeting with the owner." Of course he did. Men like Howard never yelled at their sons. They yelled at staff. Staff who couldn't yell back. And Jason continued, lowering his voice even more. "There's something else." He held up his tablet. "The documents you requested, the ownership transfer, it's all finalized. Effective as of this afternoon." I let the words settle, not shocked. I'd been waiting for this confirmation, but the timing was almost poetic. Down the hall, I heard Caroline's laughter again. Then Mom's voice, sharp and proud. A fragment of Lucas bragging to a group of guests. I imagined them posing for more photos, drinking champagne I technically owned, floating through a venue they believed they were too good for and believed I was too small for. Jason waited as I processed. He didn't know the whole story. He didn't need to. What mattered was the question in his eyes. "Are you ready?" I straightened my posture. "Where's Howard now?" "Lobby pacing. He's demanding to speak with the owner immediately." My jaw set. "Then bring him to the executive office in 10 minutes. Jason blinked. "Should I tell him who he's meeting?" "No." The word was calm, solid, final. I stepped past him, heading down the corridor, my heels echoing against the polished floor. Each step felt like shedding a skin I'd carried for years. Quiet daughter, overlooked sister, convenient target. They thought my silence meant weakness. They were about to learn silence was just preparation. The executive office, set at the far end of the administrative wing, past a frosted glass door. Guests rarely noticed. Most people assumed it belonged to some high-ranking manager. No one ever imagined what it really was. The owner's command center, quiet, polished, and intentionally understated. A place designed for decisions, not display. I entered alone. The lights hummed softly as they warmed. The ocean lay beyond the windows, stretching into the late evening blue. I crossed to the desk, dark wood, simple lines, and rested my hand on the chair behind it, my chair. For months, I'd kept my visits rare, my presence discreet, my ownership private. But tonight, privacy wasn't protection. Tonight, it was strategy. A knock sounded. Jason slipped in first. He's on his way, he murmured. And he's angry. Good, I said quietly. Let him be. Jason closed the door, just as it burst open again. Howard Sterling stormed in like a man accustomed to being obeyed. His silver hair was perfectly sculpted. His posture broadcasted entitlement. His wife Valerie followed, her earrings flashing. Then came Caroline, Mom, Ethan, and Lucas, an entourage dragged in by curiosity and the promise of witnessing drama they assumed had nothing to do with them. What is this? Howard barked, pointing a finger at me. I said I wanted to speak with the owner, not whoever she is. Caroline blinked at me, as if seeing me for the first time, a stranger, sitting where she'd never imagined me. Allison, what are you doing back here? Mom stepped in. Sweetheart, you can't sit there. That's for before she finished. I lowered myself into the chair. This is the owner's seat, I said calmly. And I'm sitting exactly where I should be. Confusion flickered across their faces. Confusion, then disbelief, then the kind of laughter people use to reject reality. Lucas snorted. Okay, seriously, move. We need to deal with this billing mess. Jason held up his tablet. Mr. Sterling, she is the owner. Howard turned slowly, brows knitting. Excuse me, she's the owner, Jason repeated steady. Of this property and several others. The room fell into a vacuum. Silent, dense, heavy. I felt it press in on each of them as the truth shifted the ground beneath their feet. Caroline's lips parted, trembling. Allison, that's not funny. It's not a joke, I replied. Jason placed the documents, bills, payments, contracts, signatures on the desk between us. The event upgrades you requested. Everything you authorized. He angled the pages toward Howard. The owner wanted these ready. Howard's gaze dropped. I watched his eyes skim the first page, then the next, his confidence cracking. Impossible, he whispered. I folded my hands. Do you need clarification? Because I can walk you through each charge. You signed for every upgrade, premium linens, extended bar hours, specialty catering. They're all documented. His face reened. You're price gouging. You agreed to the prices. My tone didn't rise. Not once. You also agreed to the terms. Mom found her voice again, strained. Allison, how when years ago I said simply, while you were busy worrying about whether my clothes were appropriate, Ethan stepped forward, needing to assert control. You expect us to believe you own a place like this? You never asked what I built, I said. You only assumed what I didn't. Caroline shook her head, her voice small. But you couldn't afford. That's the problem, I said. You never. Talk to me. She knelt beside her, cupping her face. We'll fix this. We'll get you a lawyer. Well, then she turned on me. This is your fault. She hissed. You knew. You must have known what kind of man he was. Her words were knives, but they didn't cut like they used to. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't defend myself. Diana made her choices, I said quietly. 4 years. She took from me without consequence. This time, she took from the wrong person. Mom stared at me like I was someone she'd never seen before. Diana shook her head, tears streaming. Please, she whispered. Don't leave me alone. For a moment, I felt the old instinct rise. Is the urge to protect her from everything, even herself. But then I remembered the countless nights I'd cried alone, the relationship she'd shredded, the way she'd smiled in Cole's bed like she'd won something. I knelt beside her, meeting her eyes. You're not alone, I said softly. But you are responsible. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of those words. Victor, meanwhile, was escorted past us in handcuffs, expression blank, posture rigid. He didn't look at Diana once. In the days that followed, the investigation unraveled layers of financial misconduct tied to his name. Diana wasn't charged with the most serious counts, but she was held accountable for the documents she'd signed. She took a plea deal to reduce penalties, but the damage was already done, ruined. Credit drained, accounts looming. Restitution, a criminal record she'd carry like a shadow. She moved out of the apartment with nothing but a duffel bag. Mom cried. Dad stayed quiet, and I walked behind them, hands in my pockets, feeling nothing and everything at once. A few nights later, as I sat alone in my apartment, I finally exhaled. Not a triumphant breath, just a release. A long overdue acceptance that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it unfolds quietly in the spaces where you stop shielding someone from the consequences they choose. If you felt that kind of betrayal, the slow erosion of your worth, then you understand why I didn't intervene, why I couldn't. Some patterns only break when the person creating them hits a wall they can't walk through. And if you want to follow stories like this, stories about boundaries, justice, and what happens when silence finally breaks, there's a place for you. Support us on Ivory Revenge. By subscribing, you'll get notified the moment a new story goes live. Tam Diana didn't go to prison, but the consequences clung to her like smoke long after the investigation ended. With a plea deal in place, she avoided the worst charges yet. The fallout was crushing, her savings gone. Her credit destroyed, her name, now tied to a scandal she barely understood. Mom tried to shield her at first, insisting the world had been unfair. But even she couldn't rewrite the facts printed on the bills and statements arriving every week. Within a month, Diana packed what little she had left and moved to Portland, taking a job at a small cafe. The girl who once floated through rooms now moved carefully, shoulders tight, eyes tired. I checked her social media. Only once she looked older, quieter, almost unrecognizable. As for me, I finally started therapy. I told the truth out loud for the first time. The years of comparison, the pattern of betrayal, the exhaustion of always being the one expected to understand. Healing didn't come quickly, but it came honestly. Dad and I grew closer. Mom avoided the topic entirely, and in the rare, quiet moments, I realized something simple. Sometimes the only way to reclaim your life is to stop bleeding. For people who never notice you're hurt. Looking back now, I don't feel triumph or revenge in the way people expect. What I feel is clarity, the kind that settles in when you finally stop fighting to be valued by someone determined to dim you. Diana's downfall wasn't my victory. It was the natural end of a path she refused to step off. And my healing didn't begin when she broke. It began the moment I chose myself instead of chasing her approval. If any part of my story echoes something in your own life, you're not alone. Share your thoughts below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you'd like more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for the next.